The interview was at 2 o'clock, and by 9 that morning Tendai Moyo had already ironed the blouse twice. She was 24. She was Zimbabwean, from Bulawayo by way of a scholarship, and she had a master's degree in food supply economics from a university in Fukuoka, and 62 rejections in a folder on her laptop. Her student visa converted in 10 weeks. 10 weeks, and then either she had a job offer and a work status, or she had a suitcase and a plane and 6 years of her life folded up and put away. This was the last one. Final round. A mid-sized trading house, agricultural imports. They had flown a director down for it. She had researched that man for 11 days. It rained that morning the way it rains in Kyushu in September, not weather so much as an event, and she left 2 hours early because of it, and got off the train 2 stops before the city to visit a shrine on a hill, because her grandmother had told her on the phone the night before to go and sit somewhere quiet and say her mother's name before she walked into that room. That is why she was on those steps at 11:30. The old man was about a third of the way down, sitting on the wet stone with his back against the handrail post, and there was blood coming down the left side of his face. She was beside him before she had decided anything. He had gone down at least 6 or 7 steps, she could see where, and there was a long graze up his forearm and a cut somewhere above the hairline that was bleeding the way scalps do, which is to say theatrically. Sir, can you hear me? I am not deaf, said the old man. I am wet. You're bleeding. Yes, thank you. I noticed. She got her umbrella over him. He was perhaps 80, in an expensive coat that had been through a mud puddle, with a walking stick lying 4 steps below him and a small bunch of white flowers scattered across the stone, the stems broken. She reached for her phone. I'm calling an ambulance. No, sir. No ambulance. His hand came out and closed on her wrist, and there was still enough grip in it to be surprising. No ambulance, no fire service, no police box. I will sit here in the rain until I am 82 before I let you do that. Do you understand? Tendai Moyo looked at this soaking wet, bleeding, furious old man and made a decision that she has never been entirely able to explain. Okay, she said. Then a taxi and a clinic. That's my offer. It's not negotiable, and I'm bigger than you. There was a pause, and then a small, ugly bark of laughter that made him wince and put his hand up to his head. Fine, he said. It took 20 minutes to get him down the steps. It took another 25 to get a taxi that would take a bleeding old man, and the 4th one did, and they went to a small clinic in a suburb because he refused the hospital, and there is a limit to what a 24-year-old can force on anybody. The doctor put in 4 stitches. He wanted a scan. The old man refused. He wanted the family called. The old man refused that too, flatly, and then the doctor looked at Tendai, and Tendai looked at the floor, and the doctor sighed the way doctors do and said the observation period was 2 hours and somebody had to stay. It was 12:10. She sat down. She sat in that clinic waiting room in a soaked interview suit with a soaked folder of documents on her lap, and at 12:40 she wrote the email, apologizing, explaining, offering any time that day or night, offering a video call, offering to come in on the weekend, and at 1:15 the reply came back that the director's schedule was fixed and the process would be closing today, and that they wished her the best in her future endeavors. She went into the toilet and cried for 4 minutes, timed, and then washed her face and came back out and asked the old man whether he wanted tea from the machine. Here is what she did not know. His name was Ginichiro Toba. He was 81. He had run one of the larger organizations in northern Kyushu for 26 years, and he had handed it to his son in 2009. and there was not a single person in a certain layer of that region who did not know his face. That day was the 14th of September, which was the anniversary of his wife's death, and every year on that day he went to that shrine and sat. And every year for the last 6 years his son had sent 4 men with him. Because he was 81, and because of who he was, and because that is how it works. That morning he had told them to wait in the car park. Then he had gone up the back path, alone with a bunch of flowers, for the first time in 6 years, because he had wanted 40 minutes with his wife, without 4 young men standing at a respectful distance with their hands folded. He had fallen on the way down, and the reason he would not let a bleeding old man be taken to a hospital or reported to a police box is not complicated. A man with his name arrives at a hospital, and within an hour there is a record, and a phone call, and someone at a newspaper, and, most of all, his son finds out, and the last 4 years of arguing that he could still be trusted to leave the house on his own would be finished forever. So he sat in a suburban clinic with 4 stitches in his head and let a young foreign woman buy him a canned tea, and he asked her, mostly to have something to say, what the folder was for. An interview, she said. When? 2 o'clock. He looked at the clock, which said 20 to 2. You can still, it's 40 minutes away, and I'd walk in at 1:30 with wet shoes, she said. It's fine. There'll be others. That was a lie, and she told it well, and he was 81 years old, and had spent his entire life listening to men lie to him professionally, and he knew it was a lie before she had finished the sentence. He did not push it. That is one of the things she came to understand about him later. He was a man who could wait longer than anybody. They talked for 2 hours, about her grandmother, and about Bulawayo, and about the fact that she had studied where food comes from and how it moves, and that the things she actually cared about, she got animated here, and forgot who she was talking to, was that Japan imports an enormous share of what it eats and has a rapidly aging farm sector, and that the interesting problem of the next 30 years is not growing food, but moving it, storing it, and not wasting it. The old man listened to a lecture on cold chain logistics from a girl in a wet blouse and did not say a single word about himself. At one point a nurse came through and asked him, briskly, whether there was really nobody they could call, and he said no, and the nurse looked at Tendai and said, "Your grandfather is very stubborn," and Tendai said, "Yes, he is," without a flicker, and the old man turned his face to the window and did not correct either of them. He asked her once why she had not just left him on the steps. "Because you were bleeding. People walked past, 4 of them before you. Then they had somewhere to be," she said. "So did I. I just wasn't going to be able to sit in that interview thinking about it, so it was already spoiled. That's not goodness, sir, that's a defect." He thought about that for a long moment, and then said that it was the first honest thing anyone had said to him in about 9 years. At 3:30 she put him in a taxi. He tried to give her money. She would not take it. He argued. She has said he argued like a man used to winning, and that she had grown up with an aunt who was worse. In the end, the compromise was that he paid her train fare, which was 480 yen, and she took it, because otherwise he would not get in the car. He asked her name. She gave it. He asked her to write it down, and she wrote it on the back of a clinic receipt in careful katakana, and he put it in his coat pocket. She kept his umbrella problem to the last. He did not have one, so she gave him hers. A 500 yen clear plastic thing from a convenience store, the kind everyone in that country owns 9 of, and she ran to the station in the rain with her folder over her head. 10 days later, 4 black cars pulled up outside her building in Hakata. She was on the 2nd floor of a 6-unit block with a shared laundry and a landlady who was already unenthusiastic about her. and she watched from the window as 12 men got out, and she has said that the single clearest thought in her head was, "I have done something wrong, and I do not know what it is." Kazuma Toba was 46. He had run the organization for 16 years, and he had spent the previous 10 days doing what any man in his position does when he discovers that his 81-year-old father was alone and injured for 5 hours with an unknown foreign national who declined payment. He had her investigated thoroughly at expense on the working assumption that she was an approach. The file came back clean. Not clean like a bribed clean like a girl who worked 20 hours a week at a bakery to cover the part of her tuition the scholarship didn't, who sent money home in 3,000 yen increments, who had 62 rejections in a folder, whose visa expired in 51 days, and who had, this is the part he read twice, emailed a trading company at 12:40 on the 14th of September to say she could not attend her final interview and had never once mentioned it to the old man in her care. He came up the stairs himself and stood in her doorway and bowed from the waist and stayed down there for what she describes as an extremely long time. Then he offered her a job, and Tendai Moyo said no. She has been asked about this a great deal since. Her answer does not change. I was 51 days from deportation and I said no to a job. Everybody thinks that was noble. It was not. It was arithmetic. If I took a job from that family, then for the rest of my life every good thing that ever happened to me would have an asterisk, and one day somebody would say it out loud and I would not have an answer. I was not being brave. I was refusing to spend the next 40 years with an asterisk. Kazuma Toba went back down the stairs and reported that conversation to his father, and his father laughed so hard the stitches hurt. Then the old man got up and went to work. What he did was not a job offer. It was, in a way, much worse for her, because it involved effort. Over 3 weeks, Ginichiro Toba took her personally to 7 people. A woman who ran a chilled distribution firm out of Kitakyushu, a man with 14 years in port cold storage, a former trading house buyer retired, who now consulted, a cooperative director in Saga. He was driven to each of them, and sat down and said, every time, a version of the same speech. This is Moyo Tendai. On the 14th of September, she missed the final interview of her life because she sat in a clinic for 5 hours with an old fool who fell down some steps, and she never told him she had done it. I am not asking you to give her anything. I am asking you to interview her properly, and if she is no good, tell her so to her face, and I will not be offended. 5 interviews. 4 rejections. One of them was brutal. A man told her that her Japanese business writing was not good enough for client-facing work, and that she should spend a year fixing it. And she went home and cried, and then bought the books. The 5th was a mid-sized cold chain logistics operator in Fukuoka, run by a woman named Arai Michiko, who interviewed her for 2 hours, took her out to a depot in the rain, watched her ask the loading crew 4 questions that nobody in the office had ever thought to ask, and offered her a position with a sponsored work visa 19 days before her status expired. Arai Michiko has said, on the record, at a conference, the old man asked me to look at her. He did not ask me to hire her, and if he had, I would have thrown him out of my office. And he knew that, which is why he did not. I hired her because she was the best candidate I saw that year, and it was not particularly close. That was 7 years ago. Tendai Moyo is 31. She is a section manager. She spent 2 of those years fixing her business writing, because the man who told her it was not good enough was right, and she is not sentimental about that sort of thing. And she spent 7 years going to lunch every second Sunday with an extremely rude old man who would order for her without asking, criticize her posture, ask after her grandmother by name, and refused to discuss anything about his own life beyond 1998. She learned who he was in the second month from a search engine at midnight and did not sleep. She thought about stopping. She did not stop, and she has thought hard about why, and her answer is, because a man's history is his to answer for, and none of it happened to me. What happened to me was that I met an 81-year-old on a wet staircase who would not let me call an ambulance because he did not want his son to think he was finished. I know exactly which things I am allowed to have an opinion about. She never asked him for anything. He never offered again. Twice a year he tried to give her money, and twice a year she refused, and they both enjoyed it. Ginichiro Toba died in the spring of the 8th year, at 88, in his own bed, in the middle of a sentence about baseball. She was invited to the funeral. She was seated with the family, which, if you understand anything at all about how those families arrange a room, is not a small thing, and there were men present who had known him for 50 years and had to have it explained to them who the young African woman in the second row was. Afterward, Kazuma Toba brought her a box. It was lacquered and old, and clearly worth a great deal, and inside it, folded up, was a 500 yen clear plastic convenience store umbrella with a chip out of the handle. He had kept it for 7 years. There was a note, in his handwriting, which had gotten very bad at the end. I have spent 7 years trying to think what a person gives to someone who threw away her whole future for a stranger on a staircase, and then said nothing about it, for 5 hours. Money was refused. A position was refused. I have nothing left of any value except the thing you handed me in the rain, which was never mine to begin with. Also, you still owe me the 480 yen. I checked. You paid your own fare and put mine back in my coat pocket. I found it 3 days later. You are a very difficult young woman, and I have enjoyed you enormously. She keeps it by the door. Every so often, somebody visiting her flat notices an old lacquered box sitting next to the shoes with a battered plastic umbrella in it, and asks what on earth that is. And she says, "That is the interview I missed."